everybody. Appreciate you being here. My name is Fields Mosley. I'm the Communications Director here at Maricopa County. I want to thank you for being with us today in person. Big crowd this week. We appreciate that. Of course, we know a lot of other people are joining us online on the YouTube feed, so we appreciate that as well. This is our second of 3 planned press conferences prior to Election Day. We want to be accessible to you as journalists, and we're also hoping that, of course, you can help us reach potential voters out there in our community and give them valuable information that helps them make their decisions on where they want to vote, how they want to vote, and all the options that are available to them. So we appreciate you partnering with us and coming to these and getting valuable information to share. You probably know we're the 4th most populous county in the country. Also the 3rd largest voting district by the number of registered voters. So a lot of people live here, a lot of people vote here, and we want to make taking part in that voting process as easy as possible for those registered voters. Today we're going to provide you with the latest numbers about elections, such as how many ballots we received so far and that kind of thing. And we'll also talk a lot about security, and that's why Sheriff Skinner is with us today. So I'll introduce him in a second. But first, you'll be hearing from Supervisor Bill Gates. He represents District 3 here in Maricopa County. And then, of course, Sheriff Russ Skinner from MCSO. After they speak, we'll take some questions, and Jennifer Lewer from Elections will take that. She's the Deputy Elections Director over Communications. Also, Zach Shira is here. He is an Assistant County Manager who manages comms as well as elections. And Scott Jarrett, of course, is our Director of Elections. And he, as I've said many times, he has all the information right up here. So if you have technical questions, he's a great guy to answer those questions. So I will now turn it over to our first speaker for today. That is Supervisor Bill Gates.
Thanks, Fields. Appreciate it. Great to see everyone. Again, appreciate you coming here to get an update on how things are going with the election. So the biggest news for today is that today's the last day if you want to mail in your ballot. Today is the last day to get it mailed in and still have it counted. For those people who want to vote in person, we now have 50 vote centers that are open across Maricopa County. Regardless of where you live, you can visit any one of those and you can vote in person today. You can also drop off an early ballot there if you'd like to do that. If you want to know where the closest location is for you, please go to locations.maricopa.vote and you'll be able to find the closest location for you. So Fields teased that we're going to have some numbers for you, and I want to go through a few of those. First of all, active voters. Like Fields said, we're the 4th largest county in the country, and we have 2,587,196 active voters for this election. The voters that are on that active early voter list, so these are the folks that automatically get mailed out an early ballot, we've got 2,008,287. Now, as far as how it's going so far in this election, as of the close of business yesterday, the early ballots that had been returned via either United States Postal Service or by drop boxes was more than 940,000 early ballots. We've also had a lot of people using the early in-person method. In fact, more than 75,000 total. And that is the highest number of in-person voters, early in-person voters that we've ever had up to this point during early voting. So we encourage people to take advantage of that, especially now that we've got temperatures in the 70s. You know, that's going to be a lot more pleasant to go out and visit your local vote center. So, in fact, just yesterday alone, we had over 17,000 voters who checked in to vote early in person. So the total early ballots received were now over 1 million. So that is really great. But I think it's important to emphasize and underline again that we have, for the first time since 2006, here in Maricopa County, we have a 2-page ballot. And we have races on both sides of those. So we're talking about 4 different sides of contests, 79 contests on average, and so we encourage people to do the early voting, to get that done, get it out of the way. But if they do choose to vote on Election Day in person, make a plan so that you have the time available to go through and fill in all of the contests that you choose to fill in. One of the issues that unfortunately we've had to spend a lot of time talking about in Maricopa County in the last 4 years is security. And maintaining the security both of the people involved in elections and the ballots that are involved in these elections, it involves a lot of people. There are a lot of people involved in the process, folks who are working for Maricopa County elections, and these people are our neighbors. There are friends, our aunts and uncles that are part of this. We have our partners with the political parties who are involved in ensuring the security of this process, making sure that there are eyeballs on everything that occurs throughout elections. But also, certainly when we talk about security, we think about law enforcement. And the partnerships that we have with law enforcement are essential to having a successful election here in Maricopa County. And we're very fortunate to have partners at the federal level with the FBI, U.S. Attorney's Office, of course our own Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, and then local law enforcement. And I would argue that the partnerships that we have in the Valley, which have been built really through a lot of the mega events that we've done here, that we've been blessed to host these mega events over the past few years, whether we're talking about Super Bowls or national championship games, we have that partnership and working together through ACTIC to provide for successful events. And so that's why I'm thrilled today that for this press conference, we are joined by our partner, Sheriff Russ Skinner. And I know you guys like to ask me security questions, but we've got the expert here today, and he can talk about the incredible work that is being done and will be done by his team and his other partners in law enforcement to make sure that this is a safe and secure election. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Sheriff Skinner.
Thank you, Supervisor Gates. I appreciate it. One thing with Maricopa County, obviously we keep growing. We are the 4th largest. One thing that is not new to us is major events that impact the county itself, but also those agencies within the Phoenix and metropolitan area. We have a combined partnership. We've dealt with major events for many, many years now, and this is no different. I guess it's surprising to me to some degree, and also concerning that elections has now become a focal point of the Maricopa County area, where we used to not have that back prior to 2020. It used to be a one-day event where we provided that security. As most of you know, Sheriff's Office jurisdictions typically provide that security relative to the electoral process when they wind up casting the ballots and those locations where those occur. So it is concerning to see that this heightened sense of security, the questions, the national, even global attention that Maricopa County has seen. But I want you to rest assured that there has been immense planning for many, many years relative to this operation for democracy, to make sure that this community is safe, to make sure that those locations are safe, to make sure that we get those ballots back to MCTEC safely. We are committed to this, and one thing I will say is that we have the resources and equipment, not just with the Sheriff's Office, but with the partnerships with all the Valley agencies at the state level and the federal level. And I'll say even on the other side of that is our prosecutorial agencies between the County Attorney's Office and the AG's office. There is no place in politics or this process that criminal activity is allowed, and there is zero tolerance that we as public safety will take in relative to any type of criminal act or any type of issue that arises. We want this to be a safe and secure process. We want to make sure that people get out and vote, people go through the process so that this process can happen. But we don't have any tolerance for any criminal activity. It's one thing for First Amendment, one thing to express your opinion. It's another when there's threatening or other violence that gets centered around this, and it's not going to happen here in Maricopa County. So with that, I commit to you that we will continue to work with our partnerships, and we've been planning this for over a year. We've sat down, we've had communication across all channels, public safety, and obviously our government entities relative to this. And I ask you as a community to work in partnership with us. If there are things that you see that are suspicious or concerning, please bring that to the attention of law enforcement immediately so we can be proactive about it, so that we can make sure that we can hopefully mitigate any circumstance that would occur otherwise. But with that, I'll be around for questions. Looking forward to next week, and as Supervisor Gates said, the good news is we've got good weather for it, so look forward to being out there. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. So just a couple logistical things. We are streaming this live for people, from what I understand, probably around the globe. What I would ask is, we have a lot of journalists here who have a lot of questions. So we are going to have a communications staff member come over with a microphone so that you can ask your question on, and it can be heard on our live stream. We ask that you provide your name and your affiliate. If you'd like to ask a question, raise your hand. Because of the number of people who are here, we're going to initially start with limiting to 2 questions. And if you can try to not do that famous trick of a compound question that actually has 6, it will help us be more effective and efficient in answering your questions. We've also put up some key dates here. We will be doing another press conference here at the administration building next Monday. Then we will shift the media operations over to the Maricopa County Tabulation and Election Center. So with that said, we're going to go ahead. Please raise your hand. We'll get you a microphone. And Brittany, start with Sasha.
Sasha Hupka with the Arizona Republic. I had a question for Sheriff Skinner. Sheriff, I was wondering, what are the worst case scenarios that you are preparing for on Election Day and in the days to follow?
Yeah, in the law enforcement profession, obviously we practice for everything from school violence to major events, active shooting, what have you. We prepare and train, and we're obviously ready to deal with any issue. We're not, hopefully not have any issue that arises. We're prepared for anything. We've got the resources, we've got the staffing. But as far as anticipation at this point, up to the election, we're not seeing a lot. I know in the past we saw it's after the election. It's the community members. It's basically maybe some divide out there. And we will continue to assess that. We will continue to have the resources available to that, but be vigilant with that and proactive about it. If you ask me worst case scenario, I can give you a million different things, but they may not be accurate. There's no comprehensible means to say that we can predict. If I could predict, I guess I'd win the lottery and have millions of dollars. We can't predict what's going to happen, but we can be prepared for what potentially could happen. What I hope for is that we have a community that cares about this process, that's respectful to each other, and that works together through our public safety, and that this is a safe process to be able to commence.
And if you want to ask your question, then I can, we can bring up the most relevant person to answer that question.
Sure thing. It's probably for the sheriff, but Chris Van Cleve from CBS News. Question leading up to the election about your security posture, particularly around any sort of ballot drop box or place where people may be depositing ballots in light of the fire, not only here, but the ones in the Pacific Northwest.
So just to touch quickly on Dropbox security that is not law enforcement related, Scott Jarrett, who's our elections director, can come up and talk a little bit about some of the precautions that we take there. Scott?
Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, so first thing to know that we have drop boxes in every one of our voting locations. So currently we have over 71 drop boxes available, and on election day we'll have over 260. Now the vast majority of those are in government facilities or in our voting locations, and those are monitored by individuals that are working within those facilities. We do have 2 outdoor drop boxes. Those are also on government facilities. One is at our Central Counting Tabulation Center in downtown Phoenix. The other is in Mesa. And we have fire canisters, or fire suppression canisters within each one of those. Those are also monitored as well. We have 24 hours a day monitoring of those through our live video streams, but also those are then broadcasted to the public that can watch anyone that is using those drop boxes as well. So we have a vast amount of security over those drop boxes, and if need be, I have the sheriff's office on speed dial if I ever need to call them.
I just wanted to follow up on one part of that statement. The fires that were in other jurisdictional areas were related to actual ballot boxes. The other one that was here is a postal box, and the intent, as far as what I understand with the investigation, was not to destroy ballots. It was just somebody that actually wanted to be incarcerated and be arrested at that point in time. So these are two very different things. And I think that's one thing I do want to make a point of is make sure we're validating and verifying information before it gets out there, because we don't want hysteria. We don't want false information going out there. We need valid data to make sure that these things aren't tied, or they are tied to elections. So thank you.
And sure, before you walk away there, in 2020, certainly as the polls closed, people around the world watched a scene unfold in front of the vote counting facility here. How is this year going to be different? I mean, we've read accounts of snipers on roofs and multiple layers of fencing. What's going to be different, and what's your message to citizens this go around?
Yeah, the first part, citizens to this part and go around is, again, please be respectful. Please maintain the law and don't break the law relative to any type of opinion you may have. Secondly, 2020, up prior to 2020, we did not have these issues. Again, it was a one-day event. There was nothing on that footprint of McTech. We have since, as you noticed in the 2022 cycle, and even going into the 2024, there's been improvements made for security around those facilities. And I know we focus a lot on McTech, but also the polling locations. There's been enhanced training for a lot of the volunteers. I commend the elections department for making sure that even their folks are trained and up to speed to deal with potential disturbances before it even needs to get to law enforcement. But then secondly, what is our posture? We continue to provide security at all those locations, and including McTech. As those polling locations close, we will be basically focusing more, obviously, on the tabulation center. As far as the snipers, I know that's been a talk, so I'll just go ahead and air that one out. I don't discuss operational plans. I will say that I have resources. I've told my staff a blackout period that nobody is to take off for essential employees relative to the need for potential security. My resources and equipment are dialed up and ready to go. And this is very fluid. As the environment and conditions dictate, we will make sure that level of security is provided there. Do we have a standardized footprint? Absolutely. May it be elevated, and may it be brought back at certain points of time throughout this? Absolutely. We will make sure that we're over-prepared and overestimating for any issues, but not enough to make sure that the process takes place. We don't want to intimidate anybody. We just want to make sure that the people inside that building are secure, feel secure, as well as the community out there, that there's enough staff out there to respond as necessary.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Okay, we're going to kind of go back and forth across the room. Hi, thank you.
With 12 News. We've seen some social media users with very large following already start, I'll say, casting doubt over Maricopa County's elections over the past week. How much are you monitoring social media, and how big of a piece of that is it when it comes to creating your security plan?
All right, I'm going to have Supervisor Bill Gates come up and address that question.
Yeah, thanks for the question. That's something, great credit to our team here back at, as we're reminiscing to pre-2020. We didn't have a lot of resources in following what communications were going on out there about elections. Now we have a significant team that is in there. They're monitoring social media on a daily basis down to an hourly basis for two reasons. One is security, and certainly if the sheriff wants to talk about that, although he may say, I'm not going to talk about those details, but understand the people who are going out there and they're threatening election workers, they're threatening elected officials on social media, that's something that's being monitored. But we're also monitoring social media because we understand we are in an environment now where we have both foreign actors and people within this country that are intentionally spreading misinformation about our elections. So when people are starting to raise questions already about the 2024 election in Maricopa County, it doesn't surprise me, unfortunately. And that's why we're watching this. That's why we're reviewing it. And like I said in the last press conference, if we see that there's misinformation that's being spread out there that relates to the voter's experience, that might either stop someone from going to vote at the polls or creating confusion for them, we're going to respond to that. We want to make sure, we know there's great interest in this election this year, and we want people to have every opportunity they want to go ahead and vote. And if people are going to try and deter them from doing that by spreading misinformation, we're going to respond to it very quickly by putting out the facts.
And I just want to follow up on that question. As Deputy Elections Director for Communications, a lot of people might ask, well, what is it that you do? And our primary role with the communications team is to ensure that voters have the information that they need. That is our number one priority. Unfortunately, we are balancing that with combating misinformation that might lead voters to think otherwise or to sow doubt in our democracy. But Maricopa County, I would put up against any voting jurisdiction in the country in the amount of information that we provide every day, not just during elections, to help people learn about the election process. And so we do community events. We've hosted tours at our facility and on Election Day, and right now we are responding to voters who have questions about their ballots.
And then for my second question, kind of following up on that, how do you keep morale up amongst poll workers, election workers, when we have hidden camera operations and the temperature being so high right now?
Personally, I can say it's about our leadership. It starts at the top, and to have a board of supervisors that is so supportive of everything that we do and is there to be side by side with us as we're going through this. As an election worker myself, it's really reassuring. I think for those of us who are in leadership, we try to do things like any, organization who is putting in long hours. When you're going to take a break, you can work on a puzzle in one of our break rooms. Is there an opportunity to do a potluck and have people bring in food? It is a lot of pressure, but the number one thing I think is that they have our support, and to also remind them why we are here. Because while the negative comments might be the ones that make the headlines, every day we're receiving information and things from voters who are so appreciative about what we do, and our poll workers get to see that. They are on the front lines, and so they see a lot of the tough stuff, but they also get that person who's a first-time voter who comes in and they say, hey, can we celebrate with you after you cast your ballot? And then they will have everybody in the vote center applaud when somebody has cast a ballot. There's so much good that goes on, and I think that's sometimes what gets lost in it. So we just try to keep people focused on what can we do right now today to sort of relieve that pressure, and then remember what the bigger picture is and what we're doing here. It's an amazing thing to be a part of history in the making. Next question. Hi, Gabriel.
Gabriel Sandoval with the Associated Press. I have a question for the sheriff. Could you summarize the election-related incidents that law enforcement in Maricopa County has had to handle this election season?
Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of it right now has been tied to threats to people that are involved in either the election process, dignitaries, or elected officials. We haven't had a lot of them, which is a good thing, but we did see that obviously in 2020. We see that across the nation. As we start to see Maricopa County, again, we've got enough communication out there to address these issues as far as bringing it to our attention. I have not, personally, our agency has not seen a lot relative to, you get into the Dropbox question and the other areas at this point in time. As we get closer, and we'll probably see, hopefully we won't see, but we don't typically see much prior to the election occurring. It's at that point that once I think those results start to happen, that's when we potentially see some of those type of incidents come to our attention.
Like others here, I've heard and read those reports about snipers and drones being used. Could you confirm any of that and where that might be used, or what's the official position on that?
Yeah, and again, I don't typically discuss operational plans publicly until aftermath if we need to, of why they were there or what level. Again, I've got resources and equipment dialed up, ready to go. At this point, I don't see the need necessarily for snipers. I will tell you, this is like any major event. Any major event. If we just had Super Bowl here, we just had the World Series here last year. Did you see drones in the sky while you were out there? Yes is the answer to that. Absolutely. It's an efficient tool for law enforcement, public safety to ensure it gets there quicker. It's, it costs me about $1,300 an hour to fly a chopper, where a drone is used for public safety in a multitude of reasons now. And the reality is that's a piece of equipment that we may be utilizing and probably will be utilizing to just keep visuals more on the MEC Tech Center, and also to be able to respond and, hey, there's a disturbance potentially, or we're getting information, or did you see that over there? To get eyes on it so we can be really proactive, but reactive to it immediately before it turns into something, or at least be able to address it from a public safety standpoint.
You guys are following the rules. It makes me so happy. Hi.
Hi, Nicole Grigg with ABC 15. We wanted to ask, how worried are you all about crippling lines because of how long the ballot is? And is there concern that it could turn voters away on Election Day?
We'll go ahead and bring Supervisor Gates up to talk a little bit about that.
So thanks for the question. I mean, let's talk about a few things. First of all, this is an extremely important election. There's a lot of interest in it. We anticipate Scott Jarrett has put together a plan that assumes very significant number of people voting both early and on Election Day. So it's not like this is a surprise that this is a big election. We all understand that. Because of the two-page ballot, as I was talking about earlier, we anticipate that it will take people a little bit longer than it obviously would with the one-page ballot. On average, we have 79 contests, and some of those contests are the propositions that were put on there mainly by the legislature that are pretty long to get through them all. So that's why we're telling people to make a plan. Make a plan in advance. Take the time to do your homework. Review the individual propositions and all of the contests. But I'm going to push back a little bit on the term you used, crippling lines. Okay, we all wait in lines all the time. We wait in line to buy a coffee. We wait in line to go to the movies. We wait in line for all these different things. We have waited in lines for elections for as long as we've had a republic. Okay, and I felt like to some extent, as the guy who was standing up in these press conferences in 2022, that there were some candidates who believed that their voters have a right to not have a line. That's not realistic. Okay, we have put a great plan in place to try and keep those lines as short as possible, but people need to make a plan. And we have given people the tools so that they can avoid those, to the extent that there are long lines, that they can avoid them. And I appreciate the partnership of the media in getting this information out there. Go to locations.maricopa.vote. It lists all of the vote centers that are currently open, and then all of the 246 that will be open on Election Day. You'll see those locations. You'll see the wait times. So if you see a long wait at your closest vote center, maybe drive a couple miles to go somewhere where there are shorter lines. There will be options for folks if they do their homework, take a little bit of time. And so if we work together, we can make this as manageable as possible.
And I just want to add a little bit to that. So the locations.maricopa.vote, it is updated every 15 minutes in real time. Our poll workers are going out, they're counting the number of people who are in line, they are posting that. There's not many online websites that have that type of service. I know I wish the particular coffee shop on my street corner would tell me exactly how many people were in their drive-through line at any given moment. This is something that Maricopa County does very well. We need people to utilize that tool, however. And then beballotready.vote. Supervisor Gates mentioned being prepared when you get to the voting booth. You can print out your sample ballot. You may fill it out at home, do all of your research, and then bring that ballot with you into the polling booth, and you can just copy over your answers. So there are tools out there to make this as seamless as possible.
Thank you. And then my second question, it's about the vetting of temporary workers. Are you all worried about disinformation coming from the inside from those workers, and how will you handle that?
You know what, I'm going to go ahead and address that question, Nicole, because we hire and will be hiring over 4,000 members of this community to work this election. They all are county employees. State law does prevent people from volunteering to work election. The volunteers that are out at the polling locations and at McTech are actually observers that are sent by the political parties. So everybody that we hire does have to go through an application process. Those that work inside of McTech or have a function related to the tabulation center do go through a background check. Our poll workers, while they do not go through a background check, they work in a team environment. And so we will have people in our polling locations who are different parties. We ensure that those that all parties are represented if possible at our polling locations, and we have very specific roles. And so the vast majority of the community members who are going to help administer this election are doing great work, and we don't want maybe the bad actors who are few and far between to really ruin that for everybody else. They work such long days. They get there at 5:30 a.m. on election day, and they may not get home till 11 p.m. at night. And so we would ask that anybody who does have bad intentions, that we don't need that. We need people who are there to work hard. Cameras are not allowed within 75 feet or within vote centers. We have very specific rules. Arizona has very specific laws. And so that is our message as it relates to those bad actors who may have plans to try to do something. Next question.
Hi, Alex Tabba with NBC News. Can you talk a little bit about the security measures for the workers at McTech? Will they be escorted in and out of the building?
I'm going to go ahead and turn that over to Scott Jarrett, our elections director, and maybe the sheriff might have a few comments on that as well.
So at McTech, we have layers and layers and layers of checks and balances throughout. That starts with our physical security and the fencing. We have permanent fencing as well as temporary fencing. We have invited the sheriff's office to be on site, to be there on election day and the days after as we're doing the counting. They will have security checks to make sure that we're only allowing authorized individuals onto McTech, whether those be our permanent staff members or temporary staff members, or the political party observers that play a very critical role in being on site. But our staff members, as they're coming and going from the facility, if they are asking for an escort, we have security personnel as well that could escort them to their cars. We also have shuttles that are going around to all the various different parking lots that we have available. We have increased our security footprint, not only through the sheriff's office, but with the county's security services personnel.
And then for the second question, what do you think it says about the state of our country that you guys need to have this press conference in the first place?
I'm turning that over to Supervisor Bill Gates.
Yeah, I think it is sad that this is where we're at, that we have to have a press conference that is focused on security. I think all of us, as we were growing up, we don't remember this being an issue. You know, it was election day. You would get out there, you would work for your candidates, vote for your candidates, and then wait for the results to come in. But the fact that we have to have the sheriff, and thank goodness that we have the partnership that we have with the sheriff, I think it is a sad commentary on what's happened in this country in the last 4 years. Having said that, I'm so grateful to be a member of the Board of Supervisors here in Maricopa County, where there is no sunlight between the Board of Supervisors, the recorder, the sheriff's office, the other countywide electeds, the FBI, the county attorney, the U.S. attorney. People who have tried to create this chaos in our system had hoped to drive us apart. But in fact, if anything, it has brought us together here in Maricopa County. And I'm very proud of that. And I think that anyone who thinks they're going to, rattle the foundations of the democracy in this county, they've been unsuccessful to this point. they're going to continue to be unsuccessful, and instead they ought to be spending their time out there working on get out the vote efforts on behalf of their candidates.
And I just wanted to add a little bit to that. Working in public safety for 35 years in this county, yes, the last 5 years have changed dynamically, and it is sad that we see this. But this is no different. I mean, we see the same thing in our schools right now, government buildings, government facilities. And so we continue as public safety to work in the partnership. And thank goodness, and you couldn't have said it any better, that we've built these partnerships through all resources. The communication is key with this. The staffing and the resources that are needed. The board has really supported us, but also for our community. In working with the community, we do hear a lot of the positive things. Unfortunately, I think, again, it's back to vetting valid information, social media, everything that comes out is instantaneously, and a lot of that stuff isn't vetted, unfortunately. And we're also seeing the influence of outside this country. So has it changed dynamically for us? Absolutely. But that's with everything in public safety, not just election security, I'll say that.
Hi.
I have a question because in 2020 the crowd gathered in the parking lot in McTech, and now the fence goes around it. I could see like a protest happening in the street or along that. I wonder what the crowd control plan is for election night or the following days. If a large crowd gathers on the street, are you going to make arrests, that kind of thing?
I'm gonna give this to Sharon.
And again, we have to be respectful. This is kind of a double-edged sword for us. We have to make sure that the First Amendment right is available to people. If they decide that they need to freedom of speech, we do have designated areas out there. Obviously, the whole complex has been pretty much segregated off for the need of security. Media has their own special place to be able to stage and be present on that footprint. The fact that we have that building secured is so that the ballot trucks could get in and out, so the people can get in and out, and so there's a standoff space there. If people decide to go there, there'll be a place for them to go to express their First Amendment right. But if they start violating the law, i.e. going into a public thoroughfare, starting anything of violent nature, then law enforcement presence will be taking action. And again, we have zero tolerance for this. This process needs to occur, and we need to do so safely and respectfully. So we will take the necessary actions if that were to occur, and we have enough staff and resources. A big partner of ours is the Phoenix Police Department, as well as the Arizona Department of Public Safety. We're all dialed up for this to make sure that we have the resources necessary to deal as it's dictated.
Curious as to if you guys are encouraged or optimistic by the fact that you have, I think, around over 1 million early ballots returned right now, and when it comes to concerns about, lines on election day, that sort of thing, if these numbers are a good indicator right now that, you might not have to deal with, some of those long lines, maybe up in Surprise or some of these heavy, in-person on election day turnout areas.
Thank you. I think as administrators of an election, we aren't optimistic or concerned on turnout in the sense that we use turnout for planning purposes. How many people come out to vote is really, I think probably best embraced by the campaigns and then the pundits who want to say that because of this or that. We use turnout projections primarily to be able to plan for our staffing and our resource needs. We feel very comfortable with how we have planned based on our turnout numbers, with the number of voting centers, increasing the check-in stations, increasing the voter booths, increasing staffing, so that we can hopefully mitigate some of the things that the two-page ballot and the high interest in this election might create. But that said, we are here to administer, and if people want to come out and vote, we will do everything and have planned for a higher turnout than normal, and we are prepared for that. Does anybody else have any comments they'd like to share?
I'll just say I am pleased that voters are taking advantage of all the different opportunities. So one of those planning efforts was to make sure we had a very robust early voting period for voters. whether that is to return their ballot through the mail or to visit any one of our early voting locations. Currently, we have 52 voting locations open. Come this Friday, just a few days before Election Day, we'll have over 54 voting locations available for voters. And we have had a very robust in-person turnout as well as early voting turnout. We're well ahead of where we were in 2016. And we're actually approaching where we were in 2020 when we had record in-person early voting. So I'm confident that voters will still take advantage of those opportunities, even as today. Every single day for the last week or so, we've been surpassing in-person and through the mail turnout for both 2016 and 2020.
Next one with the microphone. It's hard for me to see. Dennis.
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of questions. There's been some talk about prior, Dennis Welch with CBS 5 News in Phoenix. Sorry. Just a couple of questions about, there's been some comparisons about prior election cycles as compared now. I mean, Sheriff, could you give us some numbers so we can get a sense of what that is? Can you tell us, like, in past election cycles, what the security force would look like, how much costs you guys have had set aside in the past, as opposed to, what's the size of the security force you're planning this year, and what have you have budgeted for costs?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And obviously, prior to 2020, again, we had probably a team of 40 to 50 deputies maximum that would do this process. They would go out, be placed regionally. They would follow the ballot trucks in. They'd get into McTech. Once they were secured, it was done. 2020 changed that paradigm, obviously. We have since, I will say, 2022, and it's a multi-period event. We start actually providing some of those security services right as those first ballot boxes start to open, those polling locations, those early polling locations. Our footprint goes from about 25 employees, expands out to, I would say, safely over 200 a day. And we run 24/7 during the operation. Once election day hits, we are on 24/7. We have regional assets to be out and working with partnership with other law enforcement agencies throughout the valley to deal with the polling locations if law enforcement need or election laws are broken. But then secondly, it all then starts to funnel down to the McTech Center, the tabulation center, and we will have 24/7 security, and that is quite a few squads that are working multifaceted, and that's just deputies, security team, but we also have our emergency response center that's dialed up. We have assets with other emergency response centers, with our public safety partners. Dispatch, all of those places are enhanced. So to give you a specific number, it's a little bit ebbs and flows depending on the environment. I mean, we're a week out. I have a pretty safe and secure thought of what we need, but I adjust that daily. I mean, we have conversations each and every day to brief this and then plan accordingly. My staff, again, was put on a blackout. They are not allowed vacation as far as the necessary and first responders, so we have enough staffing and resources to do that. So it may change from day to day, and depending what the climate environment's like after the election, after those votes are in, the days leading up to the final counts in the actual canvass. And then also the Board of Supervisors, we provide additional security relative to that.
Final question. We've got some significant candidates who, this year running that have engaged in election conspiracies, these kinds of things. We have candidates who haven't conceded the 2020 election or haven't conceded the 2022 election. My question for you guys is how much of that is fueling your need for enhanced security, or from what you're seeing online and what you're monitoring?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're very concerned about those type of comments being made, and not just from potential candidates, whether they're winning, losing, or what their conspiracy theory is, back to vetting information. But we're also seeing it community outside our state, outside our country. So that's another reason why we have the platform and stance, and that will be more towards the threats. The social media will be looking at those and monitoring those sites as well as that information, and again, assess the need for additional resources to be dialed up for that, but also to investigate it. We hope that everybody, again, is respectful. The results are the results, and we can't predict what the response is going to be, but don't cross the line of basically committing a crime.
And I would just add, that we really are looking to our candidates and our leaders of the political parties, no election is perfect. There's never been a perfect election. And there will be things that might happen that we do not expect. But the problem has been people have taken, candidates and leaders of other political leaders have taken small incidents and weaponized them. And in particular, with weaponizing them, they have sometimes taken images of our elections workers and put those out there on the internet. It's unacceptable. It's despicable. And unfortunately, we had someone who's kind of a national social media figure just did that in the last week. Got into one of our training events, had a secret camera in there, and then put out there photos of our elections workers. That's got to stop. These are people, again, these are not people who've run for office like me and my colleagues. These are people who are just trying to do their part to make sure our democracy functions. This type of thing has to stop, and it needs to be more than just me and my colleagues speaking out against it. We need other elected leaders across Arizona, really across the country, speaking out against it. Election workers are off limits. They should be off limits. They should not be threatened. They should not have their names and images put out there. And I have full confidence we're not going to see that from this point on. And again, we're going to focus on this election and the count of the votes.
Yes.
To follow up on what Supervisor Gates just said and the previous questions from Bianca and Nicole. My name is Paul White, ArizonasLaw.org. Sorry, forgot about that. Those recorders of the incident of the training session last week were poll workers. Have there been subsequent conversations with those people that did the recording and about appropriate actions? And can you tell the voters, assure the voters today of what they can expect when they bring mailed ballots back in to drop off at the voting centers?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, poll workers are employees of the county. So the appropriate steps are being taken from a personnel standpoint, and it really wouldn't be fair or responsible at this point to go into any of those details. As for the information that was being provided to the poll workers in that training, everything that said was absolutely legal within the state of Arizona. Our trainers of our poll workers have been out training 2 classes a day in 5 different locations across Maricopa County for weeks. They are working hard to make sure that everybody has the best information, and we do that because we want the voters to have the best experience possible. And so I think the focus here going forward is that when you meet a poll worker, when you see a poll worker, treat them with kindness, thank them for their service, and know that they are all receiving training that is legal and is what Arizona allows in election centers.
And what about the voters? What can you tell the voters about bringing in envelopes on election day or early?
Well, there are statutes that guide how voters are allowed to return ballots. Arizona law does allow a person to return ballots for others in their household, and those they are in direct care of. I think there's a third one. Family members. Thank you.
Okay, and
one more question.
Okay, well, I'm one of those poll workers as well as being a journalist, and I may be working with those people that were recording. So how do you address other poll workers? You said earlier you said a couple of bad actors, bad apples. How do you address all the good actors that are working presently and are going to be working next week, that they have a good team around them?
I would say that first of all, having a camera in a polling location within the 75-foot line is actually a criminal violation. And so cameras are not allowed inside polling locations across Arizona. We ask that our poll workers be respectful of each other, that they follow the Arizona statutes as it relates to vote centers. And if we find that somebody is not to immediately notify us. We have channels. As a poll worker, you know, we have a command center that answers phone calls, and we have the support back at our ballot tabulation center to be able to quickly address any issues that may arise out of that type of scenario that you're speaking to. Okay, next question.
Hi, Perry Vandell with the Arizona Republic. I'm asking about what kinds of security measures are being implemented at in-person voting centers on Election Day, and what are the best ways for people who have any concerns to report those concerns via, say, for example, an armed individual surveilling a voting location and feeling intimidated?
I'm going to let the sheriff answer this, but I do want to say that one of the things that we are very sensitive to is to not disenfranchise voters, so that if they approach a vote center that there isn't a large law enforcement presence. And the sheriff's department and all local law enforcement is very respectful of that. And I'll let him come up and talk a little specifically about what people can do if they do feel like there is a situation.
Yeah, again, you may see, you may not see uniform and non-uniform. We're not going to be in that 75-foot limit unless there's a public safety need to be in that limit. Again, very much congratulations and kudos to the elections department for making sure that the volunteer staff, the poll workers, they're trained to de-escalate issues, disturbances up to a certain point. They have 3 layers of basically escalation. If you're talking about a weapon being inside that 75-foot rule, absolutely, we want people, if they feel that there is a public safety concern or a threat relative to that, then that's something law enforcement needs to deal with. If there's violence occurring, law enforcement throughout the valley has been trained relative to the election laws, but also we're still first responders. If there is something that public safety needs to be called in on, we will roll in on it. We will diffuse the situation to the point where if it is a law, they've broken the law, we will take them out of that area and deal with it at that point. We don't want to disrupt the process, and certainly we don't want to influence the process. But I can tell you that you'll have enough law enforcement, every agency is on board for election and the days even following the election to make sure that these locations are safe, that their communities are safe. Every law enforcement chief that I've spoken with has made sure that the resources are there. That's our obligations to provide public safety. We work in concert with the elections department to make sure that the lines are known of at what point do we need to trigger law enforcement. But again, if there's violence, gun, fear of intimidation or threat, then that's something that we would need to join in on.
Okay, we're going to do 2 or 3 more reporters. Colleen, I know you've had your hand up. Somebody can get her a microphone.
Yeah, Colleen Sikora with 12 News. I know we've talked a lot about these employees that are working hard to help keep this going. If memory serves me correctly, last week you guys were ahead of your hiring curve for those 4,000 plus workers. Have any of these recent events in the last few weeks impacted your headcount and the employees that you're trying to hire?
All right, well, let Scott answer that one.
So from a hiring standpoint, we are still doing very well. We're over 96% hired at our voting locations as compared to prior election cycles. That compares fairly well. So I look at our voting locations as nearly fully staffed. It's not unusual for us to have some turnover, especially as we're approaching election day, but we have our recruiters actively backfilling those positions. And then same with at our central counting facility, we're currently approaching 90% staffed, and we've expanded our staff that we are hiring for the elections, even to include night shifts as well. So I'm fairly confident that we're in a good place as far as our hiring for this upcoming election day and the days after.
Okay, I think you had a question up here.
We have a good number of first voters within our community. So can you please give some examples of the situations? They rely a lot on community organizations, but when it's time for them to call the authorities in case they feel threatened or intimidated at the voting locations, can you give some examples, please?
It's difficult because I think intimidation, it is in the eye of the beholder. And so to provide some specific situations where somebody feels unsafe or they feel that maybe they shouldn't be casting their vote because they are intimidated in any way, I think law enforcement is going to be very receptive. And if people are feeling that they are being prevented from voting or that their security is in danger, they should certainly reach out. We have done a lot of outreach with the Hispanic community, and we're hoping that for these first-time voters that they have a good experience in Maricopa County. Almost a majority of all of our voting centers do have bilingual staff members, so to ensure that those who might not be comfortable with the English language, that they have the ability to speak with somebody in their native language. All right, we're going to do one more. You had your hand up a couple times. Real quick, let's get you the microphone and your name and affiliate, please.
Alina Quast, Weltfernsehen, German News Channel.
Welcome.
Thank you.
What does flip that the other way?
Oh,
There
wow,
you go.
working at a TV station, but that's okay. What does the training for election workers look like specifically? Do they also get trainings for an active shooter drill, for example?
So our training, it's two different, I would say, areas of. You have training in the tactical and the skills that you need to perform the duties of your job, whether you are there as a clerk or you are the person who's assigned to go outside, count the number of voters. We have a curriculum that focuses on how you do the job. And then we have a lot of information that's provided on what are the laws, what are the things that people can expect, and talk about some of these situations that might come up. The most senior person in a vote center is a role. It's called an inspector. And this person doesn't have anything to do with law enforcement. It's just the name that they are given in election laws in Arizona. That inspector has been a poll worker for many different seasons. And that person has extensive training. These are the individuals who are provided the de-escalation training. They are able to have a role of leadership within that vote center. They can take voters aside if they become upset, try to address their issues. But it is somewhat dependent on what your role is, how many times you've been working as a poll worker, and then not only how to do the job, but how to do the job well and the situations that might arise out of that. All right, so I'm going to close up with some just some laundry list items. If you do have follow-up questions, you can email them to the Maricopa County Elections Communications Team, media@risk.maricopa.gov. We appreciate all of your interest applying for the credentialing process. We will, because of security and just the sheer number of journalists covering this election, be requiring that any journalists at the tabulation center on Tuesday be credentialed. And we also ask that if you have a question and it may take us a little bit longer to respond back, we appreciate your patience. We have a ton of information on our website, maricopa.vote, videos, facts, statistics. Basically, Scott's brain is on our website, and we encourage you to use those resources. And I think with that, if nobody else has anything more to say, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you again on Monday.